Thank you so much. As I announced just a minute ago, I'll be taking my text from the book of Lamentations, chapter number 5, some very serious verses of Scripture. I'd like to begin reading in verse number 11, please. They ravished the women in Zion and the maids in the cities of Judah. Princesses are hanged up by their hand. The faces of the elders were not honored. They took the young men to grind, and the children fell under the load. The elders have ceased from the gate, the young men from their music. The joy of our heart is ceased. Our dance is turned into mourning. The crown is fallen from our head. Woe unto us that we have sinned. For this our heart is faint, for these things our eyes are dim. Because of the mountain of Zion, which is desolate, and the foxes walk upon it. Thou, O Lord, remainest forever. Thy throne from generation to generation. Wherefore dost thou forget us forever, and forsake us so long time? Turn thou us unto thee, O Lord, and we shall be turned. Renew our days as of old. But thou hast utterly rejected us, for thou art very wroth against us. For 52 chapters before the 5 chapters of the book of Lamentations was written, Jeremiah the prophet pleaded with Israel to repent and turn back to God before it was too late. As the warnings from the prophet were ignored and even made fun of, the judgment of God was building a case against the nation of Israel. Jeremiah then pens down this small book, a book of weeping. Jeremiah is known, out of all the prophets, he's known as the weeping prophet. He's crying because he is now going to watch the wrath of God be poured out on the nation that he loves so much. The word lamentation means to grieve, to sorrow, or literally to lament over something. The collection of these 5 chapters mourns for the ruin and the overtaking of Jerusalem by the Babylonian captivity, which was in 586 BC. The prophet concluded at this point that their crown of justice and power and influence and independence and strength had been swallowed up by the enemy. He declared, our crown has fallen. The crown of a nation, no matter which nation it is honor, respect, and dignity. This nation of Israel had a crown at one time, as well as the days they wish they could go back and have it again. In verse 21, they begged to be renewed. That word renewed means to repair, to make it like it was before, to restore. It means to take a rusty sword and polish it till it shines. It means to bring back from ruin or salvage. It means to trim it so it'll sprout up again. And even though Israel's in captivity and their nation is shot and their testimony is ruined, they begged that God would renew them once again. I am so glad that whether it's an individual, a church, a family, or a nation, that God is still a God of a second chance. He can pick you back up and put you back on your feet again. Sad to say, this country that we love, called America, has allowed the crown of her glory to fall into the sea of liberalism and decay. Her only hope for survival is to return to the days that made her great in the first place. We must be renewed if we are ever going to recover. May I say to all the conservatives, it's going to take more than a change in the office, a boost in the stock market, and a few new good jobs to salvage this situation. We are at a point of desperation and hopelessness. Without the merciful hand of God intervening on our behalf, We are past redemption on our own. God, help us to get our eyes on the only one that can give us help. I'll lift my eyes unto the hills. My help cometh from the Lord. I've said many times, the first time I preached this message, my wife and I were shot at. I preached on 5 things that's killing this country. And just in case that dirty, rotten egg sucker's still living and maybe watching today, I want to give you those 5 points again. 5 things that's killing our country. Sissy men, stubborn women, spoiled children, sick politicians, and sorry preachers is the downfall of this country. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing wrong with America. The problem is the people that's inside her shores and her boundaries. We have failed our country. We owe Lady Liberty an apology. We have failed her in the White House. We have failed her in the courthouse. We have failed her in the poorhouse. We have failed her in the schoolhouse. We have failed her in the church house. And we have failed her in our own house. Oh, God, have mercy on this sin-sick society that we're having to abide in, and turn us back to God one more time. In order for America to be the great country that God wanted her to be and could be and should be, I think we need to turn back the pages of time and reflect on the days of old that made us this great country in the first place. If what we were doing made this country so great, why did we ever stop it or allow anything else to come into the shores of our country and lead us in another direction? Now we have to turn it back around again. It was the prophets that said, "Turn us, God, and we shall be turned." We need God. We got to have God. He's not just our hope, He is our only hope. So what is it we must turn back to if America's crown is going to be lifted back to her proper place? Let me mention a couple of them quickly. Number one, we've got to get back to the place where life is honored and respected. It's dangerous today to be in your mother's womb, and it's dangerous to be an elderly person. Today, unborn children and elderly people are considered a burden to our society. One writer said the most dangerous place for a baby to abide is in its mother's womb. Life is not honored and respected as it was in days gone by. Murder, rape, and all kinds of perversion is on our daily news and in the papers and on television. It seems like we've raised a generation with no conscience that has absolutely no value on life. We are living in a conscious, seared society. I don't know if you saw it, but this week in Ohio, a house was raided. 20 people were living in the house, 4 adults and 16 children. They were living in a very small home. I think it was 11 or 1,200 square feet. All 16 children lived in a 12 by 12 room. The youngest of the 16 children was 18 months old. And they were forced to live in a 12 by 12 room. Your bathroom's probably almost the size of the room that 16 young people had to live in every day of their life. Malnutrition, filthy, eat up in diseases and rot, and all kinds of things on their flesh and their skin, devouring them while they were stacked like stove wood in a 12 by 12 room. To you 4 adults, hanging is too good for you. There's a place in hell for some pervert that would treat children like dogs. But there's no conscience of life anymore. I read an article, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where a little 4-year-old girl had starved to death and died in her home under the guidance of her own mom and dad. And both of them were whiter than this pulpit, a bunch of fat hogs, and starved a 4-year-old girl to death. The coroner said when he did the autopsy, he found sheetrock and plastic in her stomach. She'd begin to tear the sheetrock off the walls and eat the chalk out of the sheetrock and eat plastic to keep from dying. Ladies and gentlemen, animals don't treat their young that way. People that treat young people like this are lower than animals. I was reading this week, if you ever wake up with the joy of the Lord in your heart, just turn on the news. I saw where a man and woman in a parking lot got in a fight over a parking space. Can I tell you people something? People amaze me. They'll drive 18 times around a parking lot, burn a quarter of a tank of gas, waiting for a spot. Some of you a bunch of liars, you'll even park in handicap and get out and act like you're limping. And by looking at you, those that do that, you need to exercise the most. You need to be at the other end of the parking lot. And they got in a fight over a parking lot space. And 5 or 6 cars down were 2 or 3 empty places. So we're fighting over the width of 5 cars. And the man gets out and starts addressing the woman. She shoots him and kills him over a parking spot. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a nation can only stoop that low because we've lost the value of life. We've not treasured life. And we've created some of this stuff when the stinking low-down sorry Supreme Court legalized nationwide abortion, and we're killing 4,000 babies a day in these abortion clinics and slaughter them like a bunch of animals. We're reaping what we've sowed because we took the sanctity out of life. We have got to get back to honoring life again. Number 2, if we're going to lift up a fallen crown, our leaders are going to have to be examples. People of leadership in days gone by were dream makers for the generations coming on. Look what we've got now in leadership. Presidents that's had sexual affairs in the Oval Office of our country. Politicians are crooks and liars and thieves. They're liberals, socialists, which is just a comfortable name for communist. They have anti-American ideas. We are so far gone in this country that we now have slush funds in Washington, D.C. that pays off whores to not turn in congressmen for sleeping with them. And your tax dollars has $17 million in a slush fund to pay off whores for sleeping with congressmen and keeping it quiet. Let me tell you what I believe you ought to do. If there's a low-down, sorry Republican left in Washington, you ought to name every one of them Monday morning on the House floor. You ought to tell us who they are, how much money they paid. They ought to pay every dime of it back, and they ought to be thrown out of office. Every one of them ought to be thrown out. I think we ought to name them. By the way, to all you screaming Republicans, where's the Epstein files you promised that you would release to us when you got into office? We trusted you, we put you in office, and not one name has come out yet. I'm going to tell you why. They're all guilty. You're a bunch of political pigs. You're letting these liberals put money in your pocket. You don't care nothing about America. You don't care nothing about our country. You're padding your pocket with a bunch of stinking glorified communists that ought to be run out of here anyhow. Now, I say it without apologies. A low-down communist shouldn't even be in this country, much less sitting in a political office. I say, run them out of town. Our leaders must come back to being examples. Leadership in the church is at an all-time low. Preachers are nothing more than hirelings looking for a paycheck, deceiving their people. They're worthless bums. They're worldly and carnal and lustful and ungodly. They're two-faced. They're lazy cowards, preying on children that parents entrusted these pastors to lead and love and to guide. Now, every time I say this, I get hate mail that deep. So guess what? I'm going to say it again. Any preacher that fools with somebody's kid, You ought to go to prison the rest of your life. You should never live another free day. They ought to castrate you the first day you're in prison. And I'm going to preach on it till you bunch of perverts stop it. And anybody that'll write in and cuss me out for saying that, you're a pervert too. You just hadn't got caught yet. You're a pervert. Leaders should be examples. We can't even send our kids to school anymore. You send your kids to school, they tell them we come from monkeys. They discredit the Bible. Don't even allow them to carry it in some school systems. Teachers now raping 12 and 13-year-old boys. You can't even go to the hospital. Doctors and nurses fooling around and molesting their patients. And I'm not saying this about everybody, nor am I saying this about every worker. So please don't take it that way. But a lot of these hospitals are nothing but a bunch of whorehouses. The doctors and the staff sleeping around and fooling around with each other. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I remember when there was dignity when you went in a hospital. I remember when a nurse looked like a nurse. I remember when they wore white dresses and white leotards and white shoes and a white hat. And others are the same way. There's no love for the patient. There's no decent relationship. They're being abused on every hand. Listen, we are now finding hospital staff that are raping women that went unconscious because they had surgery, and they were raping them before they woke them up. We are in a sick society. I cannot tell you parents enough. Would you please keep your eyes on your kids and stop letting them lollygag around with every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the neighborhood? You're going to wind up in a mess. What's wrong with you parents? Have you lost your mind? In this sick society we're living in, you're going to let your little kids get in bathing suits half naked and put it on Facebook and let all the perverts in this county know where you live and who they are? You parents have lost your egg-sucking minds. You're crazy. Now, just in case you think I'm overthinking, you go home and pull up on the internet how many perverts live within a 10-mile radius of where you're sitting right now. And if you'll look at that, you'll be afraid to let your kids out of the house, much less put them half naked on Facebook. And may I say this, where are you men at that let your wife get on Facebook in her bra and panties out on some beach somewhere? What's wrong with you men letting people see your wife 3/4 naked? Then you wonder why rape and all this mess is going on wide open, why there's adultery and extramarital affairs. Look, what you wear in secret and what you wear or don't wear at home, I don't care. But when you're out in public, you ought to consider your wife as a lady, and she ought to dress that way, and you ought to treat her that way, and she ought to be exposed that way, not naked in her underwear, and somebody ought to back me up today. And by the way, a lot of these ladies, I guess, that do this, they look like 10 pounds of sausage in a 5-pound wrapper. There's no examples in our leadership anymore. We got to get back to having liberty being appreciated by the citizens of our country. Just my generation, one generation ago, the flag was held in honor and respect. Now we burn it, urinate on it in the streets. A Muslim politician said the other day she was in a restaurant and couldn't find a napkin, and so she wiped her hands on the American flag. She should have never been able to spend the night in this country. They ought to got a plane that day and shipped that crazy idiot out of here and never let her back in this country again. I remember just my generation when the national anthem called us to take our hats off, stand at attention, to honor the soldiers, the men and women that sacrificed, and some even laid their lives down for us. I remember the first time as a little boy. It was back when the fruitcakes and the flower child and all them bunch of idiots from the 60s, half crazy, cross-eyed, freaked out on LSD and all that stuff, had the brain about the size of a walnut left, partying all those years. And I remember the first time I saw, Brother Ford, an American flag sewed on the seat of a young man's pants. I was a little boy, probably 6 or 7 years old, and I knew nothing about God or the Bible. But Brother Randy, something in my heart turned sour. And I said, the American flag deserves more than that. My forefathers died on the battlefield and wallowed in their own blood and never came home except in plastic bags with flags poured over them. And some idiot's going to sew it to the back of their breeches. Thank God, hopefully those days are gone, and I hope they never come back again. Oh, God, have mercy on us. The Statue of Liberty, ladies and gentlemen, if we're not careful, the Statue of Liberty could turn out to be the biggest tombstone that the world has ever known. Ever since the Vietnam War, we have not treated our veterans right. I don't know what happened to America when they came home in World War II and the Korean War. They were heroes. We had parades. We shouted. We fed them. We took care of them. We gave them hospitalization. We made sure they had a place to live. We made sure they had jobs. But Vietnam, something happened. 58,000 men and women came home in plastic bags and gave their lives. Many of them with PTSD. Many of them lame. That ain't including the millions that came back with just part of their bodies. And when they came back, instead of marching down the street and the band's playing, they started screaming baby killers, and they spit on them, and they never did get the return home that they should have gotten. But to those of you that are still living, I want to say to you, as the pastor of this church, welcome home. Job well done. You did exactly what you should have done. I remember when immigrants were coming to our country, they respected America. They learned to adapt to Americanism. Now, for some reason, we expect America to adapt to all their philosophies of these pagan immigrants that hate God and hate the Bible. I remember when I went to Ellis Island, when I stepped out there by the Statue of Liberty, my forefathers came over on a ship with nothing and stepped out at Ellis Island and stood in relentless lines without food and water because they loved this country and they wanted to come here legally. And they wanted to pursue the dreams that they knew that only America offered. And I stood there in that building on Ellis Island where my forefathers stood and left everything, their families, their homes, their incomes, and stood in line just to become a citizen of this country. And I stood there with tears running down my face, thanking God for a country that opened their arms and welcomed my forefathers so I could have the liberty that I have today. Now there's open borders and a bunch of freaks and losers and killers and murderers and rapists are coming over by the untold thousands. I say shut the border down. There should not be one illegal crossing that border. If they can't come here legally, they need to go back home. We got to get back to liberty being appreciated by the members and the citizens of our country. Number 4, let me hurry. I'm losing you fast. I can tell by looking at you. It all pivots around this next one that I'm giving you. See, you can be a conservative and not be a Christian. You can be anti-abortion and not go to heaven when you die. You can be anti-transgender and all the other nonsense that goes with it and still not be right with God. I'm just not a conservative. I'm a born-again conservative. I believe the Bible is God's final word and his final authority to all of his children. There was a day in my generation when you'd preach the Bible and folks couldn't wait to get right. Brother Randy, when I was a young preacher, sometimes halfway through my sermon, people would get up out of their pews weeping and screaming and shaking and fall out on the altar and get right with God before you ever got done preaching. They wanted to hear the truth. They responded to the truth. You preach against some things now, they don't get right. They just change churches. Or they get their little nucleus together and go down the road and start another bastard church that ain't worth a dime, that'll never have the power of God in it, because people don't want to get right anymore. I remember when people would travel long distances to sit in our meetings and just feel the power of God. I remember when they'd sit in the sun. I had a huge tent that seated hundreds of people for 15 years. And sometimes on the platform when I preached, it'd be 115 degrees. And I would preach for 30 minutes. I'd be soaking wet, passing out. And they would scream, more, more, give us more. Oliver Green had a tent meeting that went 14 weeks in Salisbury, North Carolina. His tent seated 5,000 people. It was the width and the length of a football field. It seated 5,000 people. He stayed 14 weeks in Salisbury, North Carolina with temperatures up in the 90s and the 100 heat index factor. There were not only 5,000 people in the tent every night, there was over 5,000 sitting outside on the hoods of automobiles. Over 10,000 people were driving into his meeting to hear him every night. A newscaster stopped him one day to write an article about him and said, Oliver Green, he was sitting on a platform eating sardines and crackers. He said, why are people driving so far to hear you preach? He said, I don't know. I just set myself on fire and people come to watch me burn. Oh God, give us some preachers that'll set themselves on fire so it'll give people an opportunity to watch them come and burn. Now in the average church, it's filled with power struggles, diluting the word of God. I remember when it was black or white, right or wrong, truth or lie. I remember when preachers would say, get in, get out, shut up, or get run over. I remember when men preached, and when they preached, people loved them for preaching. Now they'll love you if you don't preach. They want a bunch of teachers heaping to themselves, teachers having itching ears. That's what the average church wants. You may want that. There's some that way. There's some that way. But as long as I'm in this pulpit, I'm going to raise hell every once in a while. I hear it all the time. People say, I wish I'd have been around in the days of old. You couldn't have took it. You couldn't have. The men that trained me, you couldn't take them if they were alive today. I was reading the book the other day. This is the kind of preaching I love. J. Frank Norris was pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas. And J. Frank Norris was running thousands. He ran 7,000 at that church in Dallas. And then he also pastored in Michigan at the same time and ran 7,000 there. He pastored 2 churches running 7,000 apiece and flew from one of his churches to the other. He had a pilot in his church. One of the wealthy men in his church came to him one Sunday morning after service and said, Dr. Norris, I've always loved coming here. I love to hear you preach. I'd give a lot of money to this church, but I've got one problem. He said, when you preach on social drinking and liquor, it makes me so mad, I can't hardly stand it. He said, when I go home, it takes me a week to settle my wife down again. That's where the real problem was. And he said, I won't, and by the way, I'm going over 28 minutes, so quit looking at your watch. And he said, I'm going to tell you, preacher, I hate to tell you, but if you're going to keep preaching on drinking, we're going to have to leave. J. Frank Norris said, there's the door. It says exit, get your family, get out of here, because I'm not quitting preaching on liquor for you or nobody else in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. I'm going to keep preaching on liquor. Less than 6 months later, in a drunken stupor, that same man hit the embankment of a bridge and it knocked his brains out of his head. They said J. Frank Norris went down there with a jar and put part of his brains in the jar. Stood in his pulpit in front of 7,000 people the next Sunday morning, put that jar on the pulpit and preached on the wages of sin is death. See, you couldn't take that. You'd sue J. Frank Norris. It would affect you psychologically. You can't take that kind of preaching. But if we're ever going to get the crown lifted back up on this country again, it's not going to come from the White House. It's going to come from the church house. You read all the commentaries of days of old you want. They didn't have to deal with transgender and cyber sex and gambling and social drinkers and adulterers and perverts and God haters and mass murderers and child molesters and thieves and cons and crooks and liars and a lazy generation that's too sorry to work. They didn't face what I'm having to face in this generation. Now churches, look around what they're voting in. These thin-skinned pansies they call a pastor, a non-offensive sermon that's been derived from a perverted version of the Bible. They want entertainment on the platform. They want skits and plays and social gatherings surrounded by a spirit that's contrary to the Holy Ghost. They want to shout in their sin. They want to feel good about themselves while they're living in a lifestyle that's an abomination unto the Lord. I say to you, when sinners come to the church, they ought to feel welcome, but they ought to feel convicted. God, give us some men that'll preach. Last of all, and I must close, I remember when the laws of our land were respected. I'm old enough to remember that when police were considered a security to us, not an enemy to us. I remember when law was on the side of justice, no matter who you were. I remember going to school, and my mom and dad taught me the teachers were always right. I remember growing up where when we looked at adults, we didn't say, huh, and yeah, and sup. Sup. You little punk. If you ever come to date my daughter and you said sup, I'd choke you like a chicken. You mean you're so lazy you can't say what's up? Sup. Pull your stinking baggy britches up, you little pervert. Shave, look like a man, get your face cleaned up. If you're going to have a beard, clean it up. Quit looking like a will work for food bum. Be a young man. When you shake hands, you young men, don't shake my hand like you're dead. Put a little grip in that and let me know you're a man. Don't be a faggot with your handshake. Be a man about yourself. It's unbelievable what's going on. I remember when we had to stand up and say yes, sir, and no, ma'am to everybody that was older than us. I am living proof that my daddy never had to repeat himself to me. Because had my daddy had to repeat himself, I wouldn't be here today. Our father told us to do something one time. We knew that was the law of the land, and we did it, whether we agreed with it or whether we liked it or not. I remember when people broke the law, they paid their time in jail. I mean, I went when jail was jail. We didn't have a resort motel with weight rooms and televisions. I went to jail when jail was jail. When the water in the shower was half the size of a pencil and it was cold as ice. No hot water. Sitting in a bunk in a cell. No television. No cell phones. No contact with the outside world. Jail was meant to make people rough so that when they got out, they didn't want to go back again. The Constitution was upheld, supported, and protected and enforced. If you will go to the Capitol Dome in Washington, D.C., there's a lady standing there. She's 19 feet and 6 inches tall. She's called Lady Justice. If you'll take a close look at her, she has a sword in one hand and a pair of balances in the other. But the thing that makes her unusual is she's blindfolded. She's completely blind. Because when Miss Justice comes to enforce the law, she is blind. She's blind to money. She's blind to influence. She's blind to race, popularity, prestige, social standing, or repercussions. She only knows one thing, to enforce that which is right, no matter who it is. Nowadays, if you got the best attorney and enough money, you can just about get by with killing Santa Claus. I remember a day when judges ruled with character, and people stood to their feet when they entered the courtroom out of respect. I remember when they had character, conscience, and consideration. Hey, I remember when prisoners paid for their crimes, but were offered a second chance when they got released from prison. Oh yes, our records followed us, but it was only to remind us that we had a past and that we had been redeemed, and now we have a brighter future and a brighter opportunity. We've toiled and labored, and now we've prospered because the greatest nation in the world gave us a second chance. Let me say this in closing. I'm for the system. I'm for being tough and right. But what I don't understand is this. We've got men and women here that have felonies against them. Quite a few of our people do. Matter of fact, we ought to call this the Felony Fellowship Church. I know what it's like to have to fight the law. But what I don't understand is when we went into the system and we paid our dues for what we did wrong, why don't you give us a chance when we get out? The felony follows us all the days of our life. We can't get a job. We can't get a second chance. Nobody wants to hire us because we're a felon. And some of the people that don't hire us did worse stuff than we did. They just didn't get caught. I think the system needs an adjustment. If somebody's done their time and they've paid the price, they ought to be able to walk out of there with their head up and go in anywhere they want to go and put in a job application and nothing about a felony be mentioned. They ought to be set free from that. They paid their time. They paid their dues. Give them another chance at life. It's a funny thing to me. We'll bring these illegals over here. They're guilty of murder, child molesting, rape, thievery, and everything else. We'll put them up in motels, give them food stamps, give them cell phones, give them credit cards. I tell you, it's just unbelievable. But an American makes a mistake and they want to get it right, and a felony follows them the rest of their life and hinders them from being what they could have been. Look up here. I don't care if you shout or pout or turn your TV off. I get paid the same. Listen to me right now. You know why 7 out of 10 prisoners go back to prison? Because they don't get a chance to be anything else than what the government said they are. We're not losers. We've made our mistakes. We carry the scars. We paid the price. We've cried our tears. We've said we were sorry. We've laid in the jail cell. We've went to bed hungry. I did what the state said to do. Now get your stinking hands off me and let me be a proud American that'll stand up for our country and do what's right. Somebody give him praise in his house.